Good afternoon, everyone. And hi, I'm Jennifer Britton, author of Reconnecting Workspaces. And I'm really pleased to be here today with this in the spotlight of one of our many Reconnecting Workspaces Certified Coach. I am today here with Kerry Dobson. And Kerry is the VP of Emerging Learning Experiences at JJ-DAC. Kerry's been one of our first Reconnecting Workspaces certified coaches, and it's so great to sit down, spend a little bit of time with you, Kerry.
Thanks so much for having me, Jen.
I'm looking forward to this. So the intent today is to sort of give people a bit of a behind the scenes look at what is Reconnecting Workspaces and why might you, if you are a coach, want to become a Reconnecting Workspaces certified coach. So we're going to first start in this section, and we're going to start off by looking at Reconnecting Workspaces. Maybe you've picked up a book, maybe you've heard about it, maybe you've viewed my TED Talk. These are all the things that I'm doing to create visibility right now for this moment in time. So Kerry, I'd love for you to share with us, what attracted you to become a Reconnected Workspaces certified coach?
Absolutely, Jen. So my background is I've been a learning and development leader for over 14 years. And the past 5 of those, I've been an organizational coach. And in those roles, I've actually led and been part of hybrid and virtual teams. So I really understand kind of the environment in which this book really helps. So, myself and my team members were traveling all across Canada, the US, and even Europe, trying to, support the learning and development for large organizations. So when I heard about this, I thought, oh, if I could have had this book 5 years ago, I probably would have been much more impactful in that role. But I also knew how much this book and the resources are needed in organizations today, now more than ever.
Yeah, absolutely. And in your work right now, what are you seeing and hearing, Kerry, in terms of what people need right now?
Well, so I think the biggest part is that realization that there's an intentionality that's required when you're in a remote, virtual, or hybrid organization or work team. Proximity really helps when everybody's together to make sure that connection happens and communication happens. But as soon as one person leaves that room, suddenly that proximity actually hurts you a lot more than it helps you. So there needs to be this intentionality around how are you going to set up the team and your colleagues to make sure that connection is happening and that communication is happening. So that's the real piece here is, so many people are in this situation where they're trying to work through connection and communication, but they just don't have the tools and they've never had the intentionality behind it like they need now.
Yeah, and I love that you're drawing us into intentionality, which is actually one of the first Reconnecting Workspaces tips in the early part of the book, because just as Kerry said, it really is about being intentional with our touch points, with our communication, with our messaging, with our connections, with our culture. And we can't just wing it, right? As much as we want to wing it, we really can't just wing it. So I love that you've taken us into that. And I'm really hearing how you've been on this pathway yourself for many years, as have so many in the world. But what's different today than, say, pre-pandemic about virtual, remote, and hybrid work?
So I think there's the kind of the mass need for it, right? So before it was a unique challenge that maybe only some leaders had. I know in my organization, I was one of only a few that had that remote and hybrid versus everybody else was dealing with that in-person leadership. So now kind of everybody understands it. And the other thing is now everybody's experienced what it's like to be the person on the outside and how disengaging that can be and how much harder it can be to create that connection. So I think there's just so much more of a need than there was before. The other thing for me is the bias for action that I have as a leader and a coach. With this book, it really comes out because it really is tips, tools, and techniques that you can take back to your team. You can take back to your workplace and do something with it instead of just, reading a book that says, oh, this is hard. There's really things that people can actually do. So my bias for action really comes out when I look at this book and use this book as well.
Fantastic. And I love that because this book was really intended to be a practical primer for professionals. So you mentioned the myths the practices and the tools. And one of the pieces that I loved including as the author was really like, how do we debunk some of the myths that have existed, that have either sort of been decimated, that's a very strong word, or minimized. So what's your favorite myth that you feel in this last while has been maybe been validated, perhaps?
Yeah, so the myth that kind of comes to mind for me is in chapter 12, which is the onboarding chapter. And it's really the myth of will you sink or swim? And as a learning and development leader and coach, I was often frustrated by how much effort would go into, the recruitment and selection to find that right candidate. And then as soon as they were in the role, it would just all fall apart. And if there was an onboarding plan, it wasn't followed, but more times than not, there was no onboarding plan. So for me, that's such an important myth because just financially, there's so much waste that goes through that. But then there's a human component to that. Changing jobs or starting a new job is one of the top stressors we can have. And to not kind of support a human being through that was always a real frustration for me. So that was a myth that really stood out. And also my heart goes out to people who are onboarding right now, because I just can't imagine how different of an experience that is. And if that intentionality has not been brought to the onboarding process, I just can't imagine how disconnecting and overwhelming that might feel for some people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate that you've taken us into that whole onboarding focus, because as I saw for many years, it was the front end of an experience where often, myself included, I was thrown in as like, let's see if she can sink or swim. And, I'm a swimmer. So I always found a way to make my way to the surface. But as a leader in programming with my own teams, it was an area that I put a lot of attention, because I knew that if we did not equip people at that moment, it made it really hard. It was almost an uphill battle rather than spending, time connecting, collaborating, setting the course, all of those really important things. So that's one of the myths. How about the practices? What's one of your favorite practices that's included in the book? And how do you define practice even?
Right. So yeah. So what I was kind of thinking about with practices are what are those really tangible things that someone could really kind of take and run. And one of the things that we do at JJ DAC, and the biggest part of my role, is our Create for Your Community program, which is where we help coaches, authors, and other experts to create their own training program. So when I was looking at the practices and kind of what would be relevant for my clients, it was the section in chapter 11, which is the learning and talent cycle. And it's the micro learning in action. And the reason I really appreciated this was because so many times as a learning and development leader, you have people come to you and say, I want an in-person workshop. I need a road show. And the truth is that's probably not often the most effective way to do it. And it's costly and all those types of things. But with this pandemic, that is no longer an option. That wasn't a tool anymore, a method that could happen. So what I really love about the micro learning in action practice is there are 7 principles or ideas that people can use to really help develop themselves and their team members. So it's no longer, how do we put a workshop together? It truly is, what's the best way to approach this? And gives a lot of great ideas for how they could do it themselves.
Fantastic. So if you really want those 7 tips, 7 ideas on how to virtualize, right, a lot of these elements. And as we know, virtual may not be the only way going forward, but it is going to be, still, I think, used a lot more readily than it has been in the past.
Exactly.
Really pleased connected in with that. So we talked myths, we talked practices. Now let's talk one of your favorite tools from the book. What did you enjoy, and what do you see that you're going to be able to implement or, pass on to others?
So I have to say this one was the hardest to try to get down to one. But where I landed was the chapter 9 in leadership practices, the is or is not tool. The reason I love this tool is it's simple yet very effective. And what it is it's just having clear expectations and clear communication around what you're asking from someone and what you're not asking. So for example, if you're asking for new ideas, being clear and saying, I just want bullet points. I don't want an entire PowerPoint presentation.
So key in today's world where we're delegating, and we want to make sure that we're not, we want to make sure that we're setting people up for success. And unearthing some of the assumptions that might be made. So one of the interesting backstories to that tool is that for years, a lot of people that I've worked with, team leaders, team members, and organizations have struggled with delegation, right? That is an area that I think for many, it's still a stretch point. And so that's where when I first heard about the is not tool, I think from like the Get It Done guy, Steve Robbins, that I was like, oh, this is such a great tool. So definitely read up more about it. And like you've mentioned, right? Like every chapter, there's 21 chapters, 20 of the chapters focuses in on a different tip, tool, principle for remote, hybrid, and virtual work. So I'm glad you shared that one with us.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing that I think about with that tool is just the amount of overwhelm and burnout that people are experiencing right now. By having such a clear tool as the is not, you're taking away the stress from people that might be overthinking or thinking the request is so much bigger than it is. So to me, it's always a great tool, but even now, I think it's more important than ever to have that clarity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, good. So we're gonna shift gears for a moment. We're going to talk a little bit about the Reconnecting Workspaces Coach certification. So you were part of the inaugural group, and I'd love for you to be able to share a little bit more about that experience. So again, what do you see as being important for you in your work going forward now that you've gone through a 24-hour training program that's ICF approved for continuing coach education? What are you able to do now?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost is just speaking to the experience itself. So what I loved about the group is all of us were coaches and all of us were leaders, and yet our backgrounds were so diverse. The clients that we were serving was also diverse. So as part of the program, each of us had to facilitate 2 practicums where we were taking a tool or a tip out of the book and really making it come to life and facilitating. And what I loved was how unique everybody's approach to it was. No one's looked the same. No one's activity was the same at all. And so it really helped me to see how these tips and tools can be shared with clients. So I really appreciated that part. The part that I am selfishly looking forward to is in the work that I do with the Create for Your Community. I'm really looking forward to working with Reconnected Workspaces Coach certified coaches, but also your facilitator program. So these are the people that have been certified to either coach or facilitate the program. And the reality is there's so much in this book and there's so many tips and tools that each coach and each facilitator is really going to have to figure out what is it that I'm bringing to my clients and helping to design their own programs. So I'm really looking forward to working with that group because I have the background in the Reconnecting Workspaces and I have the L&D background. So I think it'll be great to partner with some of those coaches and facilitators in putting together the programs that will eventually kind of go out into the world and make the difference.
Love it. And again, as the author of Reconnecting Workspaces, I really put this book out after many years to create that ripple effect, right? My goal a year and a half ago was I wanted to impact 750,000 people. That was pre-pandemic. Now I know billions of people need these tools. We all need conversations, and I can't do it alone. And so that's why I've been so appreciative of the interest, right? The interest in the certified coach program for Reconnecting Workspaces. So I love hearing that you're also thinking that one next layer in terms of like, how can those certified coaches also be supported in terms of really packaging and creating their best program in the main. So, talk a little bit about your experience in the training. So we went through 24 hours. Some coaches might be like, that sounds like it's so long. Others might be like, that doesn't sound like long enough. What was your experience like this summer?
Well, so I think it's that middle point, right? I think the reality is you probably could have done 24 hours more with all of us, and we would have been happy to do it and work together. And at the same time, it was enough to kind of get us ready to go out there. Again, that practicum piece was so helpful because I got to facilitate to myself, but even more importantly, I got to see everybody else facilitate too. So it really allows it to make sense and for it to kind of come alive. And it's like, I can see myself doing that, or, hey, I would do that, but I would just change it in this way. So I think that was the really powerful part, was the practicums really kind of tied it all in together. And then it was really nice to have the micro learning where we were able to digest the chapter at a really high level and then spend time together as a group digesting it a bit more and talking through some of the concepts.
Fantastic. So who do you think, this is again your personal opinion, but who do you think can benefit? And the coaching world is so vast these days. What type of coaches might want to give this program a second look or third look?
I think it's harder for me to think about who it wouldn't apply to. I think anyone obviously in the space with leadership, with diversity and inclusion, anybody that's working with organizations in any way, shape, or form. I also think there's stuff in here for solopreneurs. So, it's hard for me to say, oh, these types of coaches won't need it, because I just think everybody's working in these reconnected spaces now, whether you're at home, at work, you're in nutrition to leadership. I just think all of these principles, or at least most of them, apply to everybody.
Fantastic. And it's so interesting you say that, because the earlier title of this book was VRTWL, virtual, right? Almost like a bumper sticker. Virtual, remote, teams, work, and leadership. And I really, as I started creating this body of work, years ago, it was really about those elements. It's not just about work, because we know that, the remote hybrid world has very few boundaries. It's about that whole integration.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So, anything else that you thought would be useful for people to, know about your work, know about this work, and where you're going to be taking it?
Yeah. So I think just in general, if you're considering it and it's piqued your interest, that's the sign. Go do it. Don't wait, because this need is just beginning. You haven't missed your time. You're at the beginning of the time. I was actually talking to one of my colleagues from the inaugural group this morning, and we were just talking about how organizations are still just trying to answer the question of, do you have to come back to work? Right. So all of this body of work is going to help us through the next few years. It's not just right now, although now is the time people are talking about it. So if you're interested in it, if you're looking at it, sign up now, get it done, be ready, because people are ready to have these conversations and they need to have these conversations.
Well, that's brilliant, Kerry. So for those that might be interested in the coach training, and it's a certified coach training program, check out reconnectingworkspaces.com/coach training. Again, a program right now in the 21-22 year is approved for 24 continuing coach education hours, including a bulk of them as core competencies. So I'll be running that multiple times, and I think leveraging the talents of this amazing group of our inaugural coaches. Again, part of my learning as a seasoned coach over the years has been seeing how, I can affect a lot of change, but it's when I activate and work through other great professionals that really we create a space to change the dialogue. And that's truly what's needed right now. Organizations, individuals need the spaces to have these conversations, to raise the questions, to debunk their myths, and to really look at spaces to actually practice some of the tools and, make it part of how they operate each and every day. So Kerry, I'm so appreciative. I'm so glad you sat down with me today. Thank you for your time. Anything in closing, or do you want to direct people to your website maybe so they can learn a little bit about you?
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you again for allowing me this opportunity and for the program itself. It's been super impactful and just such a great resource. For those that are looking at getting some support and putting together their own training programs, come check me out at jjdak.com. That's jjdak.com. We'll see you there.
All right. Well, thank you, Kerry. Likewise, check out reconnectingworkspaces.com. Pick up a copy of the book at your local Amazon. You can get print copy. You can also get digital Kindle copies. And I will put a little teaser here that this is a part of a multi-book series. So the next book in the series will be out in fall 2021. And it's a guide that I'm super excited about. It's a 90-day guide for reconnecting workspaces. So back to coaching and back to what we've been talking about. Kerry, what are you excited about with that 90-day guide coming down the pipeline?
So for me, it's about how easy it is to put into practice, right? Anytime there's a plan or an onboarding plan, it kind of gets diluted and everything goes off course. With this, it's every day. You start the day, you look at the chapter, not even the chapter, but you look at the information, the tools, you put it into practice, and then you go to the next one the next day. So for me, that just sounds like it's easy to apply and do.
Well, stay tuned. More on that in the coming days. And again, a big thank you, Kerry. Thanks as well for those of you listening to us this afternoon. And we look forward to connecting soon. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.